Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Can you guys hear? Is it working? Let me know in the comments, inshallah, if it's working. Okay, yeah, can you hear sound coming through? Yeah, is the sound working? Ya Allah. Sound? Yeah, it's working. Excellent. Alaikum assalam. Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. Okay, so Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Okay, so being aware of changes, that's the topic. So when the Quran was revealed, the time, the politics, the society, the system that was set up there, the way that society used to run, culture, weather, all of these things had a very important role in understanding the problems of the time and the solutions. So when the Quran is revealed in their time, in the Sahaba's time. So we have to understand what was happening at the Sahaba's time. Why do we need to know this? Because if we know what was happening at that time, we know exactly what the legislation, what the laws that were revealed by Allah, what they exactly meant, and what the underpinning reasons, like we call legal, the causes or the illas, what they were. So now once we know this, as time goes by, as things change, society changes, then we'll know exactly how to implement the teachings of the Quran and the Prophet ﷺ. So let me give you some examples of how things changed over times. For instance, like you have politics. So politics was very, you can say, important at that time. And the way that the society ran at that time was there wasn't a one governing body. The one governing body actually came near the end of the time of Islam, where the Prophet ﷺ became the government, you can say. And then the idea of government slowly over the years began to change. So in the time, about 50 years after that, it started to be passed down from father to son, like a monarchy. And then tribe to tribe, they began to run the administration side of the government. And slowly after that, what happened now is like we have the countries became split up. So now you have borders, you have countries, and then now you have, instead of kings and queens, you have people who are elected presidents, prime ministers, and other officials who run the system. So slowly what's happened is the way that a country is run is changed. That's one example. Another example is the economy. So in the time of the Sahaba, the economy was a very basic system that ran on, you can say, gold and silver. Those were the two bimetallic currency that was used, and it ran for a very long time until businesses began to grow, people began to spread across the world. And so now what was happening now, they had to have systems in place that were more catering for the society at that time. So the governments saw that now we need banks to be able to store money, to be able to deposit money in one part of the country, and to be able to retrieve that money in another part of the country for safety purposes. So you had banks being set up around the world. You had people setting up insurance policies. So for example, like in the 1400s, the Italians were known for maritime insurance. This is like the Muslims first come across maritime insurance. So the whole concept of insuring people, new types of contracts, transactions, and also now after that, when gold was totally uh, was replaced with notes. So notes came into circulation, and then the notes had to be given a value. So each government sets up a system where their notes have values, and then those notes are slowly being replaced now by digital currency and also cryptocurrencies out there as well. So this is another big change that's taken place over the world. And as we can see, if you don't understand what was happening in the economic level, in the political level, in the time of the Sahaba, we're going to find it extremely difficult in trying to understand how Islam is supposed to run in this society today. And then you can take other things as well. For example, like in the time of the Sahaba, how did women used to function in the society? What was their role? So we can see their role being a very simple role, in the sense that they would generally be at home. If they worked, their businesses were a family run business. They wouldn't have to travel too much. They wouldn't have to go for meetings. They wouldn't have to do all these things that we see today. And over time, what began to happen was, when Europe started slowly, because of the world wars and other things, women took more of a central role when it came to earning for the family. So then you had women earning for the family, breadwinners, and then they started to take up other careers as well, careers that in the past women wouldn't have had. So you have women working in the governments now in the West, and women being part of administrative affairs as well, and etc., etc. So you see now, in today's times, it's trying to shift. So in the past, you could have a particular career simply because you were born into the family. Now what's happening is, you need to go through, you've got two routes now. You either can be born into a family and then take up that career or whatever, or live off the legacy of your forefathers, or you can educate yourself. So you go through a system of education, and then you build yourself up. You do, a GCSE, for instance, college, A levels. You do your degree, or you can do apprenticeship, or you can do any other sort of accredited or qualifications. And then people see you and you've got qualifications. Then they'll give you a job based on that. So we're seeing a shift now, a shift in how we can function in the society as well. So a lot of these things, I've just given 3 examples here of how changes have occurred in society. And as Muslims, we have to be very cautious and very careful in how we understand the law of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because the Quran, the teachings of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, are for everyone, are for the entire mankind until the day of judgment. So it's crucial that we understand it correctly, and we don't just wishy-washy, just take the rules and apply them in a brush manner over everything. So I thought that just came to my mind. I don't know, what do you guys think about this? Are these kind of thoughts that were in your mind as well before? And I've seen a lot of people that what will happen is, a ruling or certain rulings which were given maybe 400 years ago, 500 years ago, by a particular scholar or a group of scholars in a particular region of the world, then what tends to happen is, if we don't understand how our society is functioning and how the law applies in this society, what happens is we're being unfair. The Arabic word that some of the scholars use is, it's a kind of dhulm, oppression. It's unjust or being unfair, that we're taking a particular ruling that was given under limited or restricted factors and resources at that time, and now we have to try and understand it in our society today. So these are some advanced sort of like topics that are discussed in fiqh and Islamic law, and I thought many people need to know these things, because a lot of changes are taking place now. I mean, in the past 100, 200 years, the amount of changes that have taken place, think about it in medicine, right? The amount of breakthroughs that have been made in medicine that were not even imaginable in the past, in technology, in science, in social sort of structures, in psychology, in all these different forms, in education, in all these various spheres. so many breakthroughs and so many new changes, and they're still happening, right? And sometimes what happens is something new is introduced into society, and that becomes like a, what we call a game changer. It changes things in society dramatically, very quickly, and then what happens is we have to try and adjust to that very quickly. Now, what we don't want to happen, so saying all of this, I need to make it clear, what we don't want to happen is where we dismantle Islam. So we dismantle Islam and then we restructure it again in every era. That's not what we want to do, right? And this is what happened to the Christians, and this is the footsteps that we don't want to follow, right? So we want to keep our tradition, the Quran, the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. We want to absorb it, we want to understand it through a robust methodology, and then that robust methodology or usul, we slowly apply them to the scenarios or the situations that we need. Anyway, I thought I'd mention that to you guys. What do you guys think of this? Put in your comments what you guys think. Let me know. I enjoy reading your comments. It kind of gives me some inspiration sometimes as well. Maybe I've said something, maybe you guys disagree with me. That's totally fine. Agreeing and disagreeing, this is part of our tradition as well, and we have to respect each other in that sense as well. Okay, now I'm going to be answering questions on Curious Cat now. So if you remember last time, I had quite a few questions left, so I'm going to be answering some of these questions now. Wa alaikum assalam, guys. Wa alaikum assalam. Oh, there's loads of questions here. This is what happens when I don't answer questions for over a week. Okay, so I think it was here. Alright, so Salam, you mentioned that for meat you take the Muslim's word for it being halal if you see nothing to indicate dishonesty. Would this mean that Mastur's opinion is to be accepted for diyanatan? Generally the books of fiqh, what they mention is when it comes to halal and haram, the witnessing or the opinion of a person, or the testimony of a person who is upright, who is religious, who is like Muslim, they're accepted, and someone who is not a Muslim is not accepted. That's the general opinion. So they give the example of a majus. If there's a majus, a fire worshipper, and he's selling meat, and you ask him that, is this meat halal, and he says to you yes, you can't accept his statement, you can't accept his testimony, because he might not know the rulings of halal properly. He might just be saying it, right, just to sell his stuff. But a Muslim person at least would have, his faith would or should kind of demand him to speak the truth. And if he does lie, then that's going to be on his shoulders. However, in our times today, I mean, because the rigorous and the strictness of advertising something as being halal, it has to fit the criteria for it, then there's a bit more, I would say, a bit more leeway there. So if there's a person who, at the end of the day, you feel that this person is telling the truth and the meat that he's selling is halal and he's saying that it's halal, you can't really, Sharia does not really put a person into burden, right? Laysa alaykum fid dini min haraj. So therefore, in that case, it would be there would be scope for a person to take that meat. However, istafti qalbak wala aftak al muftun, like they say. Ask your heart at the end of the day, do you feel comfortable buying this meat from this person? If you don't feel comfortable, then do not take it. It's best to go somewhere that you feel comfortable. Yeah, and at the end of the day, do that. Okay, next. Assalamu alaikum. So with regards to Ibn Abidin saying praying without wudu with the intention of to mocking is kufr, what is considered mocking in the past? Would knowingly go into prayer without wudu when in state of janaba because I didn't want to tell parents that it was in janaba due to masturbation, ejaculation, would this be considered mocking? Mocking, this to me, this would not fall under mocking. Like, if you said to me, what is mocking? I mean, in today's kind of climate, mocking would be something where you you kind of make a joke out of it, you belittle it. So if you belittle something in Islam, which is a major fundamental aspect of Islam, like for example Allah, or for example the Day of Judgment, or for example the Prophets, or the Quran, or Salat, etc., Hajj, then that would potentially be something that would lead to kufr, to lead to a person going out of Islam, because you're essentially, you are mocking that which is considered to be key to your faith, right? So in other words, how can you accept Allah? How can you be saying that you believe in Allah and the oneness of Allah and that Allah deserves full obedience and humility, and you at the same time are mocking Allah? You're making fun of Him, you're cracking jokes about Him, right? Then that would be something that doesn't really kind of fit together, because you can't revere someone, you can't have full submission to someone at the same time mock. So in this sense, the question that's mentioned about the prayer and praying in this particular case, to me it wouldn't be mocking. Mocking would be something like, for instance, an example would be if a person, let's say, wanted to just to kind of do a video and just to mock how Muslims do sajda, yeah, like proper sajda, not like the joking sajda that some people do, that they just peck their heads on the ground. That wouldn't be mocking. So it would be something like making a fun of sajda, making fun of recitation of the Quran, like that. Right? And to me, the way the person asking this question, I don't think they meant it as a mock. It was just out of fear of what their parents might say, they were saying that, so it wouldn't come under a mock. Okay, next. Assalamu alaikum wa alaikum assalam. What is a good dua and advice to make before taking someone as teacher? There seem to be a lot of people posing as sheikhs but actually deviant, especially in the West. There's two things. First of all, number one is, if you're going to be studying by someone, yeah, the most important thing you have to do is that you have to find out as much as you can about them, so you feel satisfied, right? So for instance, like if other scholars have verified this particular scholar, if he has credentials, like he has qualifications, then you can accept him to be someone. Number two, the second thing is, then after that you pray to Allah. And it's narrated in some of the books of hadith like Tirmidhi and others, that some of the tabi'een used to actually make this dua. They would say, "Oh Allah, I ask you for good company." So there was one tabi'i, and he says this dua, and he says, "I went to the mosque of Damascus, and there I saw Abu Darda, the famous Sahabi." Yeah, so Abu Darda was there, and he said, he learned from him. So Allah accepted his du'as. So this is why, we make dua, yes, but we don't use dua as the key to getting what we want. We make our effort, and then you make the dua. So if you want to study by someone, find out about them. Like for example, if someone wants to study by me, for instance, you find out about me. Yeah, you can find out what kind of things I teach. You can find out. You go to my YouTube channel, you can see how I teach. Maybe ask other people that know me, like, what do you think of him? If you're not happy, then you can find someone else. Yeah. So just like a doctor, if you want to join a surgery or a particular doctor, then you find out about them. Yeah, you get references. Okay, next question. Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah. Can you tell me, when we are doing our wudu, are we allowed to wipe the water with a towel in between? For example, I do my wudu half in the sink and half in the bath. Before I wash my feet in the bath, I like to wipe my face and arms as water dripping a lot. Is that allowed? Also, can I wash one foot, wipe it, and then put in my sandal, then proceed to the other foot, or do I have to wash both feet and then proceed to wipe them? I'm asking because I'm being told that once one has to do complete wudu from start to finish before they can wipe down any part of the towel. Please, can you explain the correct ruling? Jazakallah khair. Okay, so this is basically a difference of opinion amongst the scholars of when a person does their wudu, can they do their wudu partially? Meaning, can you wash one part of your body and then let it dry, and then wash another part of your body and let it dry, and wash another part of the body and let it dry? So some of the scholars, they say no, you can't do this. There has to be succession between washing all the limbs, so much so that one limb must not dry before the other limb is washed. This is like the Maliki position. It's called at-tawali. Yeah. The Hanafis, they say no. They say that it is permissible for a person to wash limbs of their body, and it does not have to be one after the other. You can actually have a break in between. So you can potentially dry your limbs. So this questioner, according to the Hanafi school, yes, is permissible. You can do that. Okay. Wa alaikum assalam. When we are praying in Salah, if the first rakat we read Surah Ikhlas after Fatiha, can we read any other surah in the next rakat, such as Surah Kawthar or Surah Asr, etc.? I remember reading on someone's YouTube channel that you have to read the surahs in the order they come in the Quran. So if I read Surah Ikhlas in the first rakat, I have to read surah that comes after in the Quran in the second rakat, such as Surah Falaq. What about if you have memorized any? So the Hanafis discuss this masala, and they basically say that if you're leading salat in the fard salat, then you should read in the tartib, the sequence of the Quran. And because the Quran has been put into this particular order, has been written in this particular order, it shows some sort of significance for it. So that's why you should recite, and you shouldn't miss out. You shouldn't skip sequence. So you shouldn't like go backwards. So if you read a surah that's at the end of the Quran, somewhere at the end, you shouldn't go to a surah that's near the beginning. And so that's the basic reason for this, that it shouldn't be done in the fara'id. Just show that it shows the people the importance of sequence. However, the Hanafis say, Imam Ibn Abidin mentions, if a person was to pray nafal or was praying on their own, then there is scope for that, because the tartib itself, in that case, the sequencing wouldn't be important. The sequence is important if you're in the fard salat. And the other madhabs, I'm not sure, but I think that they aren't that strict on this. Are uterus transplants permissible? I'm not sure. I mean, I don't know. I haven't really kind of researched this properly. It would be best to ask someone who's kind of researched on the issue of transplanting these parts of the body. These kind of issues, again, it's not an issue which you can give a brush ruling on. It has to be based upon person to person. So I don't really know the answer to that. My advice would be to contact a scholar. For example, like if you contact some Mufti Faraz Adam, I know he's written on organ donation, and also Mufti Zubair Butt also has written on organ donation as well. So they would be the best people in my knowledge, and Dr. Mansoor Ali. I think they'd be the best people to discuss it with. Okay, I've heard that it is permissible to remove the stray hairs around the eyebrows. How do we define stray hairs? Does it include the thin part of the eyebrows where the hair becomes scanty? So stray hairs, I mean, when it comes to eyebrows, so for example, like anything in the middle, like you see me, I've got some hair in the middle there, so I can remove that. Yeah, so removing all this hair is totally fine. And hairs around the sides, when we say hairs around the sides, what they mean is, so long as you're not making it very thin and shaped, so you're not shaping it too much. So shaping it too much, that would be a problem according to those narrations. Again, there is scholarly discussion on this issue as well, about the whole concept of shaping the eyebrows, and the narration that the Prophet ﷺ mentioned, many of the scholars say that this was based upon the Prophet ﷺ telling the Muslim women not to try and resemble a particular type of group of people at that time. So as long as I would say that, look, if you show it to someone, a person who's good and upright, you believe to be good and upright, you show it to them and you say, look, if I remove these, or if I fix my eyebrows, would it be okay? If they feel that it's okay, then it would be okay. Yeah, and I generally think if you're just kind of taking a few off here, you taking some away from here, just like generally shaping it, not making it too thin, shouldn't be a problem. Okay, next question. I understand that women are required to cover every part of their body except their hands, face, and sometimes feet. However, in many Muslim countries, you often see religious women who wear hijabs where either a part of their hairline, neck, or forearms are visible. Even the family members of scholars, even historical depictions, the idea of hijab seemed to have been looser. Where is the question gone? Some people justify this by saying that these women are simply not following the rules of Islam, but is there more nuance and ikhtilaf to this? I don't really know where the people, like those women who wear the turban style hijab and they leave their necks open, like you've seen, some famous celebrity women as well, have their necks. I don't really know where the evidence is from. I've never come across it. That's the thing. So what I think has happened is that sometimes what happens is that a particular individual in history who might have been a Muslim and who might have maybe been a famous figure in a society, but because of the culture might have been more stronger than following the rules of Islam. And this happens quite a lot in places, right? So you see this, for example, like in Pakistan, in Bangladesh, in India, where Muslims have been living there for a long time. The thin scarf that many of them wear, you'll see TV reporters, they'll be wearing the thin scarf, but you can see everything underneath despite the thin sort of scarf that they wear. So because they become famous now, sometimes on TV they might be discussing Islamic topics, like some people are going to get annoyed again, me mentioning Pakistan all the time, but I'm going to mention it, even if you get annoyed. So if you look in Ramadan, for example, in Pakistan, you'll see a lot of people talk about Islamic things. Okay, it's back here. Alhamdulillah. Okay, so going back to this question again. So like I said, we have to be very careful of this, of how people in the past maybe, or people in celebrity figures have kind of given Islam a particular sort of image, and then unfortunately, sadly, what happens is certain other people, they kind of interpret that to mean this is part of Islam, right? So we don't want this to happen as well, because this is something which it takes away the preservation of our religion. So anyway, so this is why I don't know where they get this scarf from, the turban scarf, and they show their neck and all that. I personally think it's from Jewish tradition, because the Jews have that. If you've ever seen, in Palestine, the settler Jews, they have that. The women, they cover their hair, their necks are all showing. So again, I don't know where. I don't see any permissibility for it. Okay, next. Is it permissible to share a picture video of a Muslim woman not wearing a proper hijab after they've passed away, especially if they are elderly in the picture? Yeah, elderly people, there's more scope with elderly people in these kind of issues with hijab. And again, with the issue of image, this is a very difficult one, because like in the past, the rulings regarding the hijab were based upon what women's role was in society. Now we obviously have women in, let's say, the media, women in Muslim and non-Muslim women in advertisements, outside on the street. You work with different types of people, so this means that you're going to be more exposed. Your exposure is going to be much higher to those people who are not covered, right? When their heads are not covered. So this is why these kind of issues, they're very tricky. I really haven't come to some sort of like conclusion on this. I've spoken to some colleagues about this issue, and how did Muslims in the past used to deal with this kind of situation. Now, because photos are so common in the newspaper and people forwarding people's photos, it becomes more and more common, and it's very difficult to avoid. So if it's of a woman who you don't have to forward, who wouldn't like to be seen on an image, I would say that wouldn't be permissible. But if it's a woman who doesn't really care of how she's seen by the public, and that would be different. Okay, if someone doesn't normally wear this hijab or doesn't wear it properly, do you become sinful if you post their picture online? Again, that would be the same thing there. Is it haram to do a shallow bow out of respect? I don't think there would be a problem with that. Shallow bow is not seen as ibadah or act of worship. And those narrations which talk about acts of worship and the bowing, those were seen as a form of like a semi-worship, you can say. They were like a semi-form of worship that was done to the leaders. So I don't think today people, like sometimes some countries, like you meet someone, assalamu alaikum, and they lower their heads like that. So I think it's just a way of showing respect to someone, and it's not out of worship. Are polytheists ritually impure? Are there any fiqh rules related to that? No, polytheists are not considered to be ritually impure. What the Quran says is they're najas, meaning that their belief system is filthy. Like, when you say to someone, these drug dealers are filthy people. Yeah, these criminals are filthy people. So we don't mean that they're filthy as in they walk around with all filth over their body. We mean that what they're doing, the job they're doing, the way they're carrying it out is a filthy job. Yeah, so that's what it kind of means. Okay, next. Is it permissible to meet a boss or manager of the opposite gender in a closed room in a professional setting, given that the door isn't locked and there's potential for other people to walk in? Yeah, there would. I mean, especially in a job setting, it's very difficult to have to be chaperoned or to have another member there to be able to. So in a job professional setting, I think there'd be scope there, but again, I wouldn't be able to say this is allowed in any situation, because there are so many types of jobs, so many types of situations, and the main thing we have to remember is that will something bad happen? What is the likelihood of something happening, some sort of illicit relationship happening, or sexual sort of behavior occurring if they were alone in that room? So again, I would say if a person is like, you go in a taxi, for example, so taxi driver's at the front, and it's a lady, and she books the taxi or Uber, and she sits in the taxi or it sits at the back. What is the likelihood of there being something happening, being raped, or even anything else, it being reciprocated? So in a taxi, it's very, very unlikely, because first of all, they have to have strict professionalism, otherwise they can lose their license. And also there's also glass all around and people viewing it as well. So I think, yeah, so there is scope, but I wouldn't be able to say exactly if the particular type of job is mentioned and scenarios, then maybe I'll be able to answer that better. Is it permissible to eat at a restaurant that serves alcohol and pork? I would say yes, it would be permissible to eat there. The narrations that mention you shouldn't eat on a table on which there's alcohol is served. One thing we have to remember about this kind of narration is that when was this said? So it seems as though these types of narrations of the strictness of alcohol was in a time when alcohol was being criminalized or made illegal by Islam. And so the rules were very strict initially that came. So much so that the Prophet ﷺ even banned people from using vessels that used to have alcohol in them. So if you had at home like pots that had alcohol used in them, you had to throw them away. You couldn't wash them and reuse them. It's because the Prophet ﷺ didn't want anyone to even be reminded of alcohol, because it was a very sort of like addictive substance. So he wanted to get rid of it, out of their system. So this, and in them days when people used to eat, like if you ate on someone's table, what that basically meant was you were totally happy with everything that they did. So there wasn't restaurants in them days. It was basically at your house or at their house. That's how it was. So that's why in those kind of situations you're in more control. So as a Muslim, you have an identity and you say I don't drink alcohol. So that's why it would be different over there. But in a restaurant, the restaurant setting is where everyone sits separately. People are sitting on different tables. Alcohol is being served, but you're not necessarily purchasing the alcohol. The only problem I would have is with the issue of whether you can rely on cross-contamination. So if they're saying to you there's no cross-contamination, our halal food is totally halal and is cooked separately and everything, I would have doubts about it, because if they're selling alcohol and pork, then how cautious are they going to be with dealing with halal food. So as long as you can make sure that the food that they have, then it wouldn't be, then it would be allowed. Okay. Next, when eating out, to what extent is one responsible for checking whether the food is halal? If the owner in the restaurant is a non-Muslim and he assures you that the meat or alcohol in something you've ordered, is that sufficient? Some people go to the extent of checking tiny ingredients like numbers to see if anything's haram. Animal products have been used. What is the appropriate precaution to take? Again, I mean, I've mentioned this many times. Just if you are happy in that place, if you feel that the people are upright and that they are serving halal food and all of that, then I would eat there. Otherwise, I wouldn't. To go into the details of numbers, I spoke to some scholars about this, and they said to me, who are specialists in this field, they say to me that basically you don't have to, average person doesn't have to investigate all these numbers, because this seems to go too much. There's too much investigation involved for the average Muslim, and the Sharia would never do that. So the example they give of is where Umar radiallahu anhu and Sa'd ibn Waqqas in Muwatta, they were traveling and they came to a pool of water, and there was a guy sitting there, and Sa'd ibn Waqqas said to the guy, he said, do any wild animals come here and drink from this pond, this little pool of water? And before the man could answer, Umar radiallahu anhu said, don't answer him. We drink water and they drink water as well, so don't tell us. Meaning that we don't have to investigate too much. Yeah, so by investigating too much, right, this puts people into burden. So as long as you've done your, the main sort of haram ingredients are not in it, numbers and all of that, we don't know how exactly they work. You'd actually need a degree sometimes in chemistry to exactly know how numbers work. Just saying that this number is this doesn't necessarily mean that it's haram. Okay. Next, is it permissible to attend a formal event where alcohol is served, a banquet, networking, or if non-Muslim friends or neighbors invites you to an event? Again, I mentioned that one. If a non-Muslim friend invites you home for a meal and they decide to have a glass of wine at the table, are we obliged to ask them not to? Not necessarily. Not necessarily. In my culture, elderly non-mahram uncles sometimes kiss you on the head, forehead, on top of your hijab. Is that allowed? If they are very old, yeah, that's permissible. If they're very old, an age where they no longer are an age of marriage. Okay, zina, especially when done by those who are married, is an enormous sin in Islam. What I want to understand is that does zina symbolize physical relationship, or is it confined to the act of penetration? What if a couple does everything else but zina? Would there still be a major sin? So zina is what is known as a what do you call it? A kind of like a pathway sins. So it's a sin that leads to zina. So zina is the penetration, right? However, everything that leads to zina has been prohibited by Islam. So Allah prohibits, for example, lustful gazes, prohibits touching, prohibits these kind of interactions, all these things that will lead up to that, prohibited those. So yes, all of these things would according to scholars be considered to be sins. So a person would be sinful if they did any of these things intentionally. And zina is obviously of a higher degree, but these would also be considered to be sinful as well. Is it permissible to listen to Quran before sleeping if it means you might fall asleep before the recitation finishes? Would this be disrespectful to the words of the Quran? Not necessarily. I mean, I do it sometimes as well. And I would say respect and disrespect is all down to, do you feel that this thing is bad? If you feel that this thing is bad, then I wouldn't do it. Right? But if you feel that, look, this is okay, I'm not disrespecting the Quran, I don't feel as though I'm disrespecting the Quran, then it wouldn't be. Respect and disrespect, I think people conflate this with cultural sort of like norms of it. So sometimes, for example, like for instance, some communities, they feel that if you're reading Quran, a person in front of you shouldn't put their back to you. So what's happened now is everyone after that thinks putting your back to the Quran is a sin. But putting your back to the Quran is not a sin. What is a sin is if you put your back towards the Quran in such a way that you're disrespecting it, like you lean on it, or for example, like you don't care about it. That would be a. But just having your back towards the Quran because of the way you're sitting or where you're sitting wouldn't necessarily be sinful in itself. So I think people nowadays, what's happened is this idea of respect is supposed to be a more of like a subjective thing. So respect is more subjective in these matters. So what's happened is people have made these into principles and like frozen them, and now everyone thinks that these are basically, if you do these, you're respectful. If you don't do these, you're sinful, right? So I mean, I remember in madrasa, we were in madrasa, sometimes I wouldn't stand up for the teacher, and other guys in the class would stand up. So some of the guys would afterwards say to me, "How come you don't show your teacher respect and stand up?" I didn't realize that standing up or sitting down is a sign of disrespect. I don't feel that, and we don't do that where I'm from. We don't do that. We don't like kind of get up for the teacher. So it's that kind of a thing. Okay. Assalamu alaikum salam. I know perennialism is blasphemy. What about holding Christians' hands and saying grace when at dinner with them? I was at a dinner where a little kid led grace and said, "Oh God, thank you for this food. Keep us safe and make go home safely." I said, "Ameen." Afterwards, what is the ruling on this? He didn't say Father or Holy Spirit or anything. The food was unhalal. So basically, it was haram. Make dua that I will be stronger in resisting pressures of non-Muslims. Please, Sheikh. Barakallahu fi. So, when it comes to dealing with other communities, what we have to remember is, one is their belief system. So we disagree with their belief system, right? As a Muslim, that's the Quran. You can say 1/3 of the Quran is like aqidah beliefs. So we have to be clear about our own beliefs, and if someone asks us about other beliefs, we have to be clear about that. So we, for example, say we don't accept Christians to be on the right path. We believe them to be astray, right? Simply because you cannot worship someone other than Allah, or even if you call him the Son of God, you can't worship him. So one is, we have to separate ourselves from believing what they believe, identify that. The second is living amongst them, buying, selling with them. So the Quran tells us about these rulings. So Allah says in the Quran, Allah does not prohibit you from those people who are not hostile towards you. So you can deal with them, you can even live with them. If your parents are non-Muslim, if your children are non-Muslim, you can live with them, no problem. And for a man as well, the Quran says you can marry a Christian woman as well, or a Jewish woman. So this is why it's very important for us to understand that cohesion, working together, is something which the Quran promotes. That we kind of live in the same community, we work in the same community, but we're clear about our beliefs system. Yeah. The problem is when we don't have a culture. If you go to, for example, like Palestine and these places, you see Muslims and Christians living, side by side. They'll have shops together. They'll greet each other in the morning. They'll sit with each other sometimes and eat food. But the thing is that when you live in a society where you're totally cut off, and you come from a different background, and you start to become more practicing, so you start to kind of sanitize your like religious sort of approach. You try to make it as pure as possible, and sometimes that actually results in a person sort of twisting or misconstruing the teachings of Islam. So when we say, for example, the Christians are wrong in their beliefs, so we kind of conclude from that therefore that everything else associated to them we cannot approve of. We can't live with them, we can't live under their government, we can't study from them, we can't all these things, like the whole package people like bring. So that wouldn't be the case. So if they're making dua, then fine, make dua. But obviously you're making dua with you believing that Allah is listening to your call. Yeah, and it's fine if they are saying what they're saying, but you say to them that or you say Ameen, as in that Allah is listening to me, then there's nothing wrong with that. Okay, assalamu alaikum. Is it permissible to cut hair or nails during the state of janab or major impurity? Yes, it's permissible. Some scholars say it's disliked, but that's not like disliked and sinful. It's just something which is not right, as in it's better to be clean and take a bath. Okay, does not talking to your spouse count as forsaking another Muslim? My husband said something which upset and angered me, so I stayed silent 4 days until my anger went away. I still said salam and a few words here and there when needed. I I'm worried if I spoke I would say bad things to him, anger him. Am I sinful? No, you're not sinful. That's fine. Yeah, so these kind of things happen between friends and family. The Prophet ﷺ, he gave he said like 3 days. A person shouldn't kind of cut off from their brothers or sisters more than 3 days. Yeah, so we need like a breathing period where we can have a bit of time. Sometimes this happens between husband and wife, sometimes between brother and sister, etc. So there needs to be this breathing period. But I would say, as long as you're giving salam, as long as you're not kind of totally shunning them away, that's something which is natural. Naturally, you are going to feel angered. You can't kind of get rid of your emotions, so you need time period for your emotions to calm down. Okay, what should a woman do if she needs to make wudu and the only place she can do that is where men can see her? Is it permissible to uncover the awrah in such a situation? So in these kind of places, if a woman is in a situation, obviously she can show her face and her hands and her feet. But the arms, I think that's the only problem that she'd have, is the arms. And according to Hanafis, as long as she touches her head, just touching she can put her hand in a scarf, touch her head for massa of the head to be done. But her arms, she just has to wet her arm, and she just has to put her arm under her dress and wet her arm or her sleeve. That wouldn't be an issue. And I don't think it'd be too difficult for a woman to be able to wash these parts of the body. So I don't think it'd be too much of a struggle. I mean, does any woman have this kind of a problem and it's too difficult for them? I mean, I can't imagine how a woman would find it difficult. The scholars do mention things like, for instance, if a woman is in the state of janaba and she needs a ghusl and there's no place to take ghusl, obviously, then they say she can do tayammum in that case and then make up a salat later, qada. Okay, next. What should a woman do if she needs to make wudu and the only place she can do that is... I did that one. In the bathtub, is the water on the floor considered used water? So would the bottom of the feet have to be washed separately? So in the bathtub, so it depends. So if you have a bathtub, you're standing in the bathtub and the water is flowing and it's going into the drain, that water on the ground would be fine, because water that drips off your limbs, not all of that water is going to be considered off your limbs. A lot of that water is actually excess water that it doesn't even touch your body. Yeah, so this is why it would be fine. But if the water was the plug was blocked and the water gathered at the feet, then I would say at the end, once you wash the body, at the end you wash your feet at the end, if there is stagnant water there. And that's not because the water is polluted or anything. That's simply because the impurities on the body, so there might be impurities, might still be in the body, so that small amount of water is contaminated. Okay, assalamu alaikum. Do we need to do istinja every time we go to the toilet, or can we just use toilet roll to wipe once or 3 times? What's the ruling when it comes to children as well? Do we need to wash each time, and what's the case if someone has to use the toilet very often for number 1, like every hour, very frequently? Does the same rule apply? So when a person goes to the toilet, they don't need to always wash the private area. So the rule basically is that if the impurity goes beyond the area of the body, more than the size of a coin, so a large coin, it's more than the size of a coin, then they have to wash it, or at least with a wet tissue, like wipe it away. Otherwise, yeah, they don't have to use water. They just have to dab it with a tissue or something. That's fine. Yeah, and with kids, I mean, we should try to train kids in washing, but we don't have to always do it for them. Yeah, so that's that. Okay. Assalamu alaikum. Does this same rule apply to 11-year-old girl as a woman when praying, for example, arms covered up to the wrists, ankles covered? Yeah, so if she's reached the age of puberty, if she's started to menstruate, then she has to cover like a woman covers. Yeah, she can expose her face and wrists and feet in salat, and everything else covered. But if she hasn't reached that age, then she can expose more of the body, but it's best to get her used to covering up. Wa alaikum assalam. What's the ruling in regards to celebrating children's birthdays? What can we and can't we do? So celebrating birthdays, I mean, what is the problem with celebrating birthdays? So generally people will say it's imitating other religions, or they'll say things like it's extravagance, wasting too much money, or they'll say there's no permissibility mentioned in the Quran or Sunnah. So these are not very strong arguments. Birthday is simply a time of the year that comes where a person wants to celebrate. Yes, there are non-Muslims that celebrate this, but that doesn't mean that Muslims can't celebrate it. For example, non-Muslims will celebrate Independence Day. Yeah, it doesn't mean that Muslims can't celebrate it. Or for example, non-Muslims celebrate graduation day. It doesn't mean that Muslims can't celebrate it. So when we say imitation, that's a very big topic, and it requires understanding of what we mean by imitation. So this wouldn't fall in imitation. Birthdays are fine, you can celebrate them. What I would say is a person should not do something in a birthday which would clearly go against the rules of Islam. For example, like extravagantly overspending, like spending so much that the people in the community that they think that they spent too much. Unless you're living in a stingy community, yeah, that's different. We can't help that. But you get my point. Okay. During the khutbah, can one say the salams on the Prophet ﷺ and say Ameen to supplication? Does the hadith not permitting forbidding evil during khutbah merely show that the purpose behind not doing so is to not aggravate the situation as opposed to not speaking at all? Is it permitted to verbal make supplication in between the two khutbahs? So this is a good question. So when they mention about the speaking, there's a hadith where the Prophet ﷺ, he says that, or to the nearest meaning, he says that when the Imam comes out, then فَلَا صَلَاةَ وَلَا كَلَامَ. Yeah, so there's no salat and there's no speech. People shouldn't speak, people shouldn't pray. So Imam Hanifa rahimahullah says that when the Imam comes out, everyone should go silent, stop speaking, and you shouldn't pray. And Sahibain, the two students of Abu Hanifa, say no, you can speak all the way until the Imam starts his talk, then you can't speak. And there's another narration which says that whoever even touches a pebble, plays with a pebble on the ground, has wasted their Jummah. As in, scholars say this means they won't get the reward of the Jummah. The Jummah is done, but they don't get the reward of it. So if we look at these narrations and we look at the importance of focusing on what the Imam is saying, the Hanafis have said that even saying like salam to someone, or even telling someone not to speak, even that is considered to be wrong as well at that time. And that's why they say if the Imam gives dua, we shouldn't say Ameen aloud. Say in our hearts. Yeah, so you say in your heart, or salutation of the Prophet ﷺ as well. So you say in your hearts, and that would basically, that's the basic reasoning behind it. So according to Hanafis, no, verbal du'as wouldn't be allowed. So it should be quietly. Okay, is it sinful to abbreviate the sending of peace and blessings of Allah? No, it wouldn't be sinful. Again, this goes on the issue of respect. So you write peace and blessings be upon him sallallahu alaihi wasallam. If you were just to write a sad, or you were just to write SAW, or PBUH that some people write, would this be something that's wrong? So some of the scholars, for example, like there's a book by Sheikh Ahmad Shakir. It's about the history of like authorship in Islam, and in there he mentions about some of the early scholars who used to write sad, and then in the dream they saw the Prophet ﷺ, and he said, why don't you write the full thing? And I remember once I was studying from my teacher, and he was speaking and I was writing down, and it was studying hadith, and sometimes the lesson used to last for like 3 hours long, just writing. So I used to just write sad. So because sallallahu alaihi wasallam takes time, and then I would miss out what the teacher was going to say next. So he said to me, don't do that. He said, write the full thing. He goes, there's more barakah in this. So I mean, it wouldn't be a sinful thing. It would just be something which is considered to be an etiquette, mannerisms. Because shortening things in Arabic is actually considered to be part of Arabic language. Yeah, there's something called nahat, yeah, which is actually shortening statements. So for example, you've heard of Bismillah, yeah? So they actually call Bismillah Basmala, and they call Alhamdulillah Hamdallah, and they call Subhanallah Tasbih, and they call La ilaha illallah Tahleel, they call Hayya ala Salah Hayy ala. Yeah, so they have like these different words for it, shortened acronyms for it. Okay, next. Okay, last question. Salam, is there a hadith where the Prophet ﷺ said two women are intelligent as men? Is that one of the reasons women aren't allowed to give fatwa when they do the mufti course? I understand, but I don't know how to explain that a woman can't give fatwa even thought she can do the course, even though she can do the course. I understand they aren't as intelligent, but I am being called sexist. I just want to know why they can't give fatwa. So this is a very long question. So there's several things in this question. Have you guys understood this question? Does this question make sense to you? Yeah. What I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna, because I'm feeling a bit thirsty, so I'm just gonna get myself some tea, inshallah. Right. So just give me 5 minutes. Yeah. So I have a 5 minute break. I'll be back in 5 minutes, inshallah. Yeah. So 5 minutes. So just give me a 5 minutes break, inshallah, and I will be back. Assalamu alaikum. Can you guys hear? Let me know if you can hear. Let me start, inshallah. Ya Allah. Yeah, is it working? Can you guys hear? Yeah, is the sound working? Okay, excellent. Alright, so let's start then. So, going back to the last question that we have. So, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Okay, so this question, I think, is a very common question that people ask. So, I think I'll mention a bit of detail. And then I'll try to answer the questions that you guys have posted. So, the question basically is, I'll repeat it again, is there a hadith where the Prophet ﷺ said women aren't as intelligent as men? Is that one of the reasons women aren't allowed to give fatwa when they do the mufti course? I understand, but I don't know how to explain this, that a woman can't give fatwa even though she can do the course. I understand that they aren't as intelligent, but I'm being called sexist. I just want to know why they can't give fatwa. Okay, so I think you guys have understood the question. So first of all, what we have to understand is that when it comes to Islam and genders, males and females, there is clearly difference between men and women in regards to their role, the way they've been created. We clearly know that men, have certain parts of the body that women don't have. Women have certain parts of the body that men don't have. So when it comes to the way that they worship Allah, generally it's the same, but there are certain things which they differ in. So for example, like rulings of menstruation, women in those days, they won't be praying, they won't be fasting, and men with regards to being providers, etc. When it comes to certain narrations, what we have to understand is the Prophet ﷺ, his statements can never be statements that go against Allah's message, the Quran. You can never ever go against that. It's not possible, because everything is united, everything is one. And as we know that Allah is the Hakim, Allah is the wise, all wise, and every single thing that the Sharia has told us is best for us. Allah telling us to pray is best for us. Allah telling us to fast is best for us. Allah telling us to do Hajj is best for us. Allah telling us to, get married or have children, etc., etc. All these things that we have in these rules and regulations, we believe they are all best for us, because Allah would never tell us to do something which is bad, wrong. And the Quran tells us this time and time again. So now when we have certain, for example, like hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, we have to understand that the Prophet ﷺ statement has been passed down by people. Sometimes they have passed it down word for word, which is very rare. Sometimes they may have passed it down, however, it's passed down in the meaning of it, not the exact wording. Sometimes it has been slightly added, some extra words have been added to it. Sometimes some words have been omitted. Sometimes the context has to be understood for each statement. This is why studying hadith is something I put a post up recently on my Facebook as well about the dangers of coming to conclusions on self-study of hadith. And this is something which confuses a lot of people who are not trained in the field. So if you haven't studied from someone and you just cut and paste and you quote things from here and there, even if you quote things from the Quran, it can become very dangerous as well. Like for example, there's certain verses in the Quran where Allah says, fight the mushriks, kill the mushriks. And if you kind of don't understand how this works in the whole understanding of the Sharia and the Quran, you're going to make big mistakes. So the same with the words of the Prophet ﷺ as well. So if we were in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, anything he said to us, it would have made more sense than having heard the hadith 1400 years later. Yeah, that's clearly understandable, because there would be more context there. So the Prophet ﷺ, for example, like on one occasion he said, this is not true with this, but just generally, on one occasion the Prophet ﷺ, he said, if a fly falls into the in your drink, dip it in and then throw it out, because one of the wings has a cure and one of the wings has an illness in there, a disease in there. So someone came to a Muslim scholar once, this was in France, and they said to him, I think it was Sheikh Maulana Abdul Hamid, and they said to him, that this science has now proven that flies, they don't have this in their wings, they don't have a disease in their one wing. And so he gave a very good answer. His answer was that when the Prophet ﷺ said this hadith, isn't it possible that there could have been a fly at his time which he knew about, which Allah had told him, that this fly was very dangerous, and that the fly, if it fell into the drink, that was the particular sort of cure for that illness that the fly carried. Yeah, so nowadays, I mean, if we think about it, like things like mosquitoes carry malaria. People in the past would never have imagined that a mosquito can be responsible for so many thousands of deaths because it carries an illness. So the Prophet ﷺ may have been speaking about a specific type of fly that's now extinct, because the average life of a fly is about 1-2 weeks. And so isn't it possible that there could have been a fly at that time that's no longer in existence? So this is why we have to understand hadith very carefully and try to understand it in the context. So the Prophet ﷺ, on one occasion, he was giving a talk, and he said that to women, he said that women are generally naqisatul aql wa deen. They are naqisat, meaning they are, naqis literally means to fall short. So people generally translate this word naqisatul aql. They say they are deficient in their intellect. This is a wrong translation, by the way. They are deficient in their intellect and in their religion. Now this doesn't make this sounds very sort of like derogatory about women. Because first of all, we know that there were many important women in history. Maryam alayhi salam being one of them. The Quran talks about. There was the wife of Fir'aun. There was the wives of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and so forth. So we know these were very intelligent women. So therefore, mistranslation, I think, is one of the reasons for why lots of people become deterred from Islam and this like ex-Muslim movement. A lot of the times, I personally believe it's simply a matter of, in most cases, it's simply a matter of either bad experience with Muslims or it's mistranslations, misunderstanding of texts. So I think this is a very good example of a misunderstanding. So naqisatul aql would mean that they fall short in aql. What does it mean, fall short in aql and fall short in religion? So aql basically means, it doesn't mean intellect at all. It means the ability to be able to use the common sense. So common sense is about rational thinking. Aql would be better translated as clear thinking, rational thinking. Like for example, when you start thinking of, for example, if you're driving your car and you think to yourself, if I go over the speed limit now, right, I might injure someone, I might hurt someone, so I'll drive slower. That's you using your aql. Or for example, like if you're gonna go work in the morning, you're gonna put your alarm on. So that would be common sense. That's your rational thinking, that it makes sense for me to put my alarm on, so I get up early in the morning, etc. So men and women have difference in obviously their bodies. So one of the difference is women are more emotionally charged. Women are much more emotional than men. Women can bear more than men when it comes to problems. Men will try to rationalize everything. They'll try to think of everything rationally. Women will use more of their love, their emotions. And sometimes the emotion takes over a person. Now this is also found in men as well. There's many men out there who are more emotional than other men. And there's many women out there who are more rational than other women. So this kind of a statement the Prophet ﷺ was making, that they are naqisatul aql, it doesn't mean that every single woman is naqisatul aql. Some of the commentators actually say that this was referring to certain women at that time. So there were certain women he was talking to. He was talking about them. It wasn't all women. And this is why it's important for us to understand hadith in the context. So naqisatul aql in that case would mean that there are certain women out there who kind of become extremely emotional in everything, and they don't use their rational thinking. He was just telling them that. So this can apply to men as well, and it could oppositely, it can not apply to many women as well. So naqisatul aql in that case would mean that women are generally humans who are overwhelmed with their emotions and they can't think straight sometimes. So sometimes they can't think straight, and so because of the emotions. And many of us have seen this even with some men as well, like we said. And the other one was naqisatul deen, that they're deficient in their deen. So it's not deficient, it's they fall short in their deen, as in those acts of religion which require you to exert yourself, the deen aspect of your religion, they don't have to do as much as men. So you call this naqisat. So it's not something which is deficient, because deficient is a negative term. It means they are less. So they're not less. It just means that they have been absolved of doing certain duties. For example, like when it comes to when they're menstruating, they don't have to fast, they don't have to pray. So they're absolved of that at that particular time. So this is why I think translation. So I think that answers the first part. The second part is is this why they can't give fatwa? No, that's totally wrong. Women can give fatwa. Fatwa, I think I should make a video on this concept of fatwa. What does fatwa actually mean? When people say this scholar has given a fatwa and he's allowed to give fatwa and she's not allowed to give fatwa, what does this exactly mean about fatwa? Because there's a lot of confusion, I think, out there. Inshallah, I'm gonna make a note of it, and in the future I'll make a video on this idea of fatwa. And when we say so and so has ijaza to give fatwa, what does that exactly mean? Because sometimes, let's say you learn a bit of fiqh and you teach someone fiqh, does that mean you're giving them fatwa? Or is fatwa something more nuanced? So women can give fatwa, and I think there's a culture out there that makes women feel as though women are second class scholars and they can't give fatwa. Fatwa should be left to men, which is totally wrong. There are, in history, there are thousands of women scholars who were known for being muftiyas. Yeah, loads of them. There's so many. From the time of Sahaba, Aisha radiallahu anha is one of them. Salama radiallahu anha is another one. And then you have another group of scholars in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, and then tabi'een, tabi'een. Imam Malik's daughter was a famous one. The wife of Imam Kasani, the 500 scholar, Hanafi scholar. She was one, and there's so many, there's a whole list of them. So I think this is a misunderstanding. I think there needs to be clarification on this. And if women feel that they're not allowed to give fatwa, and they think, that's something which they need to correct themselves, because they're projecting a wrong image of Islam. And these kind of things, they just stoke the fire of feminism. I think we've got to be very careful of this. Anyway, all those questions are finished. Now let me try to answer these questions you've got here. Okay, so wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah, mashallah, jazakallah khair, man fado, unknown error, alaikum salam, sister Amina, wa alaikum assalam. Okay, a book. So I've got a book today which I'm going to show you guys in a bit. Could you answer these questions? It's called the Muzhir. So I'm going to show you this 2-volume book. I'll just show you a bit of it. Okay, who else do we have? Abu Sabir, alaikum assalam. Okay, the fun. I have a call. Please pray for me. Allah give you shifa. Okay, Sister Valerie, wa alaikum assalam. Sharif, wa alaikum assalam. What seems to be the greatest weakness in our ummah? The greatest weakness is we've turned away from the Quran, I think. That's the biggest weakness. Okay, Veton Betiki, is that how I say your name? Hope I probably messed it up. Wa alaikum assalam. How Quran treat consciousness? Thanks much. How Quran treats consciousness? I'm not sure I understood that question. Okay, sister, mashallah. Okay, Tahmeed, mashallah, is back, and you've got one exam left, bro. Muslim night, alhamdulillah. Fahim. Okay, okay, can you please explain your khula answer again? Okay, which question was that? If you can remind me the question. Okay, a few years back in Pakistan, a scholar decided to have his son's marriage on the 10th of Muharram to dispel the notion amongst Muslims that it brings bad luck. Started a huge debate. Want to know your views? I don't know. You done it. It's fine. What do you want me to say? Was it a right thing to do? Was it wrong? It's fine. And sometimes you have to do that. Sometimes as scholars have to do things deliberately just to show it's permissible. Yeah, so people causing a notion, sometimes it's right, sometimes it's wrong. I don't know why he done it or how he done it. Okay, for Hanafis, how much movement will break your salah? I've seen people from other madhahib taking their coats off during salah, putting them back on. Are Hanafis stricter on this issue? So the Hanafis generally have a rule, which is anything that is for islahus salat. This is their rule. Anything which is to keep the kind of decorum of your salat, to keep the kind of the dignity of your salat, the validity of your salat, then you're allowed to make such moves. So for example, maybe your phone rings, taking your phone out, turning it off because it's going to affect your salat. Or for example, maybe a woman's scarf falls off and she has to pick it up, put her scarf back on. Yeah, so these kind of things, the Hanafis are basically like that. So if it's unnecessary movements, in other words, unnecessary movements are if someone sees you from outside and looks at you and is watching you and thinks you're not in salat, then that wouldn't be allowed. That would nullify the salat. That's considered to be amal kathir, excessive actions. So anything which is for islahus salat is allowed. Even if a snake is coming after you, you're allowed to take a stick and hit it, right, and then return to your salat. Is considered to be valid. And the Hanafis even say that if a person breaks their wudu, like, farts basically, accidentally, they can actually go perform wudu, come back and continue from where they left off. Okay, wa alaykum assalam, Muhammad Umar Mustafa. Is it wrong to listen? Is it wrong to not listen when the Quran is being recited? If you're sleeping or falling asleep while the Quran is playing, you would be in a state where you're not fully paying attention. No, it wouldn't be a sin. I mean, do you feel it's wrong? Like we said earlier on, if you feel it's wrong, then you shouldn't be doing it. Yeah. Just like, for example, let's say you're in the masjid and there's Taraweeh going on, and someone is tired and they just want to have a little nap. So Quran is playing. So is it wrong for them to go to sleep? So it wouldn't be wrong. Yeah, it wouldn't be wrong. What is wrong is the verse of the Quran when it says listen attentively. The scholars say ijma is done that this is referring to in salat. Imam Tabari says once Imam Tabari was walking and he was speaking and salat was going on and they were reading Quran, and someone quoted the verse and said, aren't you supposed to be silent? And the Quran says when the Quran is being recited, he goes, that's for in salat, inside of salat. But obviously outside of salat, a person, if you feel like, if for example, if I'm listening to Quran or something in the car and I'm speaking to someone, I lower the volume, turn it off, and I speak to them. I feel it being not the appropriate thing to do. Do you have any Hajj tips? Just go for it, bro. Hajj tips is, you're going to find it difficult, just keep making dua to Allah, be patient as much as possible. Why do you think Imam Albani declared Ifrad and Qiran as bid'ah? No idea. Wallahu alam. I don't know, I haven't read it. Okay, and how would you respond to a Salafi who parrots this opinion against those who did do Ifrad and Qiran? I mean, again, the madhabs differ. The Hanbalis, the Malikis, the Shafis and the Hanafis differ as to what is best. According to Hanafis, Qiran is best. According to Malikis, Ifrad. To Shafi'is, Tamattu. Hanbalis, Tamattu, etc. So these kind of opinions, because early scholars held these opinions, how can they be considered bid'ah? I don't understand. So I mean, with regards to people who, for example, like criticize other scholars without a dalil, just by quoting one individual, I think these people, need to sort themselves out. It's unfair. Okay, Manfado, is it permissible for men or women of mature age to wear ta'weez? Ta'weez, I mean, you mean like why are they wearing it? Like, what's the exact thing that's written inside of it? If a person has a ta'weez or has something written or verses of the Quran, Imam Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah, who is so strict on these kind of issues, even he allows these kind of things. And it's mentioned from some Sahabas, or Abdullah bin Amr, he used to put on his children like some verses of the Quran he would write and he would tie it to them. Otherwise he would teach. Personally, I don't wear ta'weez. When I was young, my mom used to put ta'weez onto me. Yeah, but I've never ever worn a ta'weez after that. I always resort to reading verses of the Quran, reading du'as, adiyas. I use that for protection. Okay, what's the difference between a shat and ghanam? What's the difference between shat and ghanam? Ghanam is like ism jins. It's like the genus, the ghanam. And the shat is referring to like individual ones. Shat and shia. So ghanam is like a ism jins. You know what that is? Genus. Okay, what does the term fawr and tarahi refer to? Fawr means like immediately should be done. Tarahi means it can be done delayed. What should a woman who gets her period during tawaf al-ifada do per the Hanafi madhab? So according to Hanafis, she's got two options. Option number one is she waits until the days go and then she does the ifada later on. So if she can't do it on the 10th, she waits until her period finishes, and then she does her ifada later on. If she can't wait and her flight's going to go and she has to go, she can do tawaf on the 10th in the state of hayd, but then she'll have to sacrifice, give them, and then it'll be done. Okay, unknown error. What about the Mawlid? I've mentioned the Mawlid before. So we mentioned about the Mawlid. Okay, Sharif, alaikum assalam. Standing when relieving oneself because the toilets are extremely filthy, yet it's time for salat and time is short, say on break at work. Yeah, I mean, standing up and relieving oneself, it's not a sin. According to Hanafi, it's not considered sinful. It's considered to be better not to do. They say it's better not to do. Um, but if you have to do it, like sometimes it has to be done. Like sometimes you go to some toilets, it's filthy, you can't sit down, otherwise your clothes will get dirty. Or for example, you've gone on a long walk, trek, and you know your knees are aching, killing. So the Prophet ﷺ, on a few occasions, he also stood up and urinated. Some Sahaba, in fact, were known to stand up and urinate as well. So you know, if you need to do it, then you can do it. Just make sure that the drops of urine are not left. Okay, and make sure that it doesn't go into your trousers as well. I'm sure if a person takes care, they can do that. Okay, let's see. What other questions are there? Okay, in a hadith Qudsi, the Prophet ﷺ said that Allah said, I am as my slave expects me to be. Ibn Hajar rahimahullah said, meaning I am able to do whatever he expects I will do. How would you respond to the following statement? As a result of this hadith, it's okay to commit any kind of sin we want to, so long as we maintain a favorable opinion of Allah, as this will guarantee that Allah will forgive us and reward us. This means we don't need to worry about committing sins. Okay, so I mean, this kind of statement is a very sort of like foolish statement, because it's ignoring everything else in the Quran, that Allah is the one who punishes, Allah is the one who, you know, takes due punishment from a person. So it's very kind of like, this is, you know, a person what we call al-mutasawwif. Mutasawwif is a person who just relies too much on Allah's mercy, which is actually something which is frowned upon in the Sharia. So this is why, you know, just say to the person, read the Quran, man. Yeah, read the Quran, read other verses as well. Because when people take these kind of snippets of hadith and they say things like, based on this hadith, and they superimpose this one hadith over the entire Sharia, that's totally absurd, guys. I mean, that person is just mocking or playing around with the Sharia. Okay, Abdi Haji, wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah. Muslim Night, Sheikh, sometimes when teaching online your hands are free but screen is writing. Are the screens pre-recorded and then you comment on them in the form of lessons? Yeah, so basically what happens is, when I make these videos, I have to make the videos in different sessions. So I have to do in maybe sometimes 3 or 4 different. That's why one video, one like 20-minute, 30-minute video can take me about 2 or 3 hours, or maybe even more sometimes to make, because I have to edit it. So the sound, what I have to do in the beginning, when I first started making these kind of videos in like about 2012, 2013, I used to speak and I used to do the writing as well, and that was very slow. So if you've noticed some of my early videos I made, so then what happened was, Khan Academy, I was watching one of his videos, and he was basically saying that what someone told him, because he's got this thing called Khan Academy where he does a similar thing, and that's where I got the idea from initially. So he said what he later on began to do, someone told him, is record it and then speed it up and then do a voiceover dub. So I have to do a voiceover for every video. So I have to make the video and then I have to do a voiceover, speed it up, and I have to do a voiceover. Otherwise, for the viewer it seems very slow. So the viewers like to see something flowing very fast. That's how I do it. Okay, wa alaikum assalam. Ink dries. Any tips on doing hifz for women, especially when they go a week every month where they cannot recite? So, yeah, this is a tough one. This is, you know, for people who are doing hifz of Quran, women who are doing hifz of Quran and they are menstruating, I've heard some of my colleagues who actually say they can take the Maliki opinion on this issue, and they can read, otherwise they'll forget Quran. So if a woman was to do that, I wouldn't see a problem there. If it was strictly for, let's say, hifz reasons, yeah. Otherwise, if it's not for hifz reasons, if it's just for teaching the Quran, they can break up the words. Yeah. So for hifz reasons, a woman taking the Maliki opinion, I wouldn't see an issue with that. And the Maliki opinion is that women in that situation are allowed to read the Quran. Okay, is it true that one is not allowed to relay his dream to others in first 3 days after having the dream? I've never come across that. Also, how does a person stay motivated when they don't have family to support to do hifz? One person wants to do hifz, her husband supports her, but her family are against it. I think they think women forget. What I would suggest is, what you can possibly do, and I've seen this work, make yourself a WhatsApp group with other people who are interested in memorizing Quran. And then what you can do is motivate each other by having like a certain amount that you're going to complete. And that way it kind of helps you. So you kind of get motivation from other people who are at your kind of, or in your situation as well. That's what I've done in the past as well with memorizing certain texts. Okay, is it permissible to wash non-harmful bugs like spiders, ants or flies down the plug hole in the sink, suck them into a vacuum cleaner or zap them dead using a bug zapper racket? Pests, anything that is a pest, right? Anything that falls under pests can actually be killed. So pest doesn't have to kill you. It can just be something which is very problematic, like it's causing problems in your house, there's an infestation or things like that. If it's like you're going out your way to kill insects, that's wrong, days. So if there's an insect in the back of your garden and you're taking your vacuum and you're going to hoover up all the insects there, even though they're not even affecting you in any way, that would be wrong. But if it's something which, you're cleaning your house and they get sucked up, or, they're causing cobwebs and things in the house and you suck it all up, then that I don't see a problem with that. Okay, if yes, does one have to say Bismillah Allahu Akbar before physically killing the bug? Unless you work for HMC, then otherwise no. Wa alaikum assalam. Alinda, sorry, pay. I don't know how to say that. Yeah, I messed it up. Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Muslim night. Jazakallah khair. Please keep it up. May Allah give you the strength and sincerity and keep it accepted from all of you. Ameen. Jazakallah. Thank you very much. MashaAllah, make special dua, guys, for my patrons. Some of my patrons deserve more of your du'as than me. Yeah, so make special dua for my patrons. May Allah give them strength. May Allah give them, steadfastness, and may Allah accept them for the khidmah of deen. Sometimes you don't even know. Wallahi, sometimes I make a video. Like, for example, this mic I have here that I'm using at the moment here. Yeah, as you guys can see, this mic. Now, you guys probably have seen me show this mic on my my social media. This mic was basically, the way it was donated here, it's donated to me. It's a £200 mic. I went for a dinner somewhere with some students, and I just, in the car, I was mentioning to them, I said, my mic on my computer, this was like in about 2014 and 13, I can't remember exactly. I go, the mic on my computer has gone bad, and does anyone know what type of mic would be best for me to use for this setup? So later on that day, or next day, a student texted me that was with us and said, I know a guy whose parents have passed away, and for Sadaqah Jariyah, he wants to support and he wants to buy the mic for you. You just tell him which mic you want. So the mic that I saw was a much cheaper mic. It was the same company, Blue, but it was a much cheaper mic, a Blue Yeti. And he says fine. So the guy got me the top of the range one at that time, and he sent it to my house, and he said, just make dua. So imagine this now. Every video I've made with this mic, and people have learned Quran. If you go to my Quran channel, my Quran series of learning Quran basics, and the amount of people that have made like sincere du'as and have for the first time learned how to read Quran, imagine that. So many people, I've stopped putting up their comments, and then the people that learned how to understand grammar and fiqh, and the people whose questions got answered, etc. And even you guys listen to it now. Every one of these, a dividend, a share of the reward is going to that guy's parents now. Imagine that. Yeah, so, subhanallah, you don't know. Sometimes who is benefiting more? Is the person speaking benefiting more? Is is, are the listeners benefiting more? So this is why the Prophet ﷺ said, sometimes the person to whom knowledge is sent actually benefits more than the person who says the knowledge. Okay. So anyway, alhamdulillah. Okay, next. Okay, killed in such a cruel way. I mean, if you want to do a nice janaza for the fly and that's totally up to you. But we have to remember, look, as Muslims, we're living in this world, and putting ourselves into difficulty and hardship isn't supposed to be the aim. Right? So these kind of insects, it's difficult to hoover the ground and then make sure there's no spiders there. And if you're grown up, I mean, sometimes what happens is you're grown up in a culture where spiders are revered. You respect the spider, don't say anything to it because, there's a surah in the Quran that's called a spider. But they forget to remember Allah is describing the spider's web as the mushrik's way of, system of belief. Okay, Sharh al-Qatar Nada, the Sharh of Ibn Hisham himself is one of my favorite Nahu books. I did ta'sil on his book. What are your thoughts on this book? Yeah, alhamdulillah, I think it's a very good. I'm actually doing it, and the patrons actually get access to it. So I think we've reached lesson number 10, I think, on it. Yeah, so it's a very good book, very nice. I'm doing a whole series on it, but patrons get access to that. Also, Sheikh, how many hours do you read on average, and how many hours do you read the most these days? Read as in read Quran, is it? Or does reciting Ayatul Kursi and then blowing on the house doors guarantee that the house will be safe from being burgled? Is this a practice from the Sunnah? Not exactly this way of doing it, but protection from harms. Yeah, protection from harms like jinn and etc. Yeah, and there are other du'as as well. The Prophet ﷺ would read and say, you'll be protected from everything. Yeah, like Bismillahi alladhi la yadurru ma'a ismihi shay'un fil ardi wa la fis sama'i huwa as-sami'ul 'alim. A'udhu bi kalimati llahi tammati min sharri ma khalaq. 3 times in the morning, in the evening. Allah protects everything. Okay, but the Ayatul Kursi and blowing on everything, I haven't really come across anything like that. Okay, I mean dua for patrons. Jazakumullah khair, Muslim night. I have realized that I have feelings of evil eye over a friend. How fortunate they are, and who they, how do I correct myself? You jealousy, you mean? Do you mean you feel jealous about someone? Thanks for sharing the mic story, Sheikh. That was beautiful and motivating. Alhamdulillah. I mean, make dua for the guy and his parents. You said last year that you are looking to take a few students under your wing for Arabic if they are serious. Did you go through with that Sheikh? Okay, yeah, I actually did, didn't I? I'm thinking in these summer holidays that we got coming up, I think I was thinking of doing an intensive thing. But yeah, that idea is still there. Yeah, it's still there. It's not going to be at the moment, but yeah, At the moment, I'm just very busy at the moment. Okay, Fahim Ustad, how important is it to recite a longer part of the Quran in the first rakat of Salah compared to the second rakat? It's not. It's just ikhtilaf of opinion between Imam Muhammad and Abu Hanifa. And they say the longer part is simply because the first rakat has thana in there, subhanakallahumma. So it's naturally always going to be longer. And in Fajr they mention, because Fajr, people are asleep, so you want them to catch up in the first rakat, so you stretch it slightly. But it's not necessary. Okay, last question, then finished, inshallah. Khalas, last question. Ya Allah. Okay, so is it forbidden for a man to kiss the forehead of his deceased wife, or for a woman to kiss the forehead of her deceased husband? You see, this is a kind of masala which is, I would say, where fiqh and emotions, they are kind of like very difficult to try and reconcile. So technically, according to the rules or the principles that the Hanafis have derived, we would say that when her wife dies, the relationship between the husband and wife totally finishes. So therefore, she's no longer his wife, and therefore he's not allowed to take any sort of pleasure from her. So just like a non-mahram woman would be impermissible for him to kiss and touch, he wouldn't be allowed to kiss and touch her. And the opposite way around, it would be allowed, because even though the husband has died, the woman still has to go through a period of time before she is totally out of his nikah, which is 4 months and 10 days, the waiting period. So this is why, in this particular situation, if the wife dies, the husband wouldn't be allowed to. If the husband dies, the woman would be allowed to. This is according to the Hanafi school. But like I said, emotionally, sometimes it's difficult to be able to tell people this. Like if a woman has been with her husband for so many years, or a husband has been with a woman so many years, and she dies, and then he becomes extremely emotional. It's very difficult in these situations. But that's basically how the Hanafis approach. Okay, how long to get a good grasp of Arabic with a Sufa Institute Alim course? I would say if you do the full time, you can do it in a year or two. Yeah, I would say maybe 2 years, and you'd become very good. The full time one. Part time would probably take you about 4 years. 4 years maybe. 4 and definitely 5 years. Okay, anyway, Jazakumullah khair, guys. Thank you very much. Again, another long QnA, but alhamdulillah, I covered all the questions. And Jazakumullah khair for everyone for staying and listening to me all this time. I don't know if some of you guys just like looking at these books, and that reminds me, when I finish off on this, inshallah. So this is a very nice book. This is called Al-Muzhir. It's by Imam Suyuti. It's in 2 volumes. This book basically is all to do with things to do with the Arabic language. So it's not strictly a grammar book, but it's got things in there which are extremely interesting things about the Arabic language. So something like, for example, I was reading today, and I'll just show you guys. Yeah, with this. So you have in language where, for instance, you have I don't know what you call it in other languages, but like in Urdu you have it as well. Yeah, you have say chai shai. Do you want some chai shai? Have you ever come across that? Yeah. Yeah, have you come across that? I don't know, in English, is there any kind of word like that? So you guys know what I'm talking about? Yeah. I mean, in Pashto, we say a lot of these kind of things. Right? We say a lot of these kind of things. In Urdu, we say these kind of things as well, like chai shai. In English, do we have any kind of words where you say one word and then you bring another word that rhymes with that word, even though it might not necessarily have a meaning? You know what I'm saying? Anyway, might be in English, might not be. So he has a section on this. He goes, in Arabic, there's loads of words that are actually used in Arabic like this. So for example, he brings a whole list of things. For example, like Harun Yarun, Roti Shoti, yeah, that's it. Yeah, Harun Yarun. Yeah, this is in a hadith, the Prophet ﷺ even said it. And for example, like Hasanun Basanun. Yeah, Hasanun Basanun. Like really nice. For example, what else? What other funny ones were there? Shaitan Letan. Yeah, this guy's a Shaitan Letan. Yeah, Bengali has it as well, yeah? Hocus Pocus, excellent, Hocus Pocus, yeah, that's the one. Tip Top, excellent. So Arabic has this as well. So that was an interesting chapter he has. Yeah, Happy Chappy. So I think this is very interesting, like this kind of usage, because it shows the humor that people have. It's a kind of like a subtle humor that people have, and they use these kind of funny sort of like words for this. Okay, so that's one, and there's another section. Let me just find. So for example, like he's got this section on statements and words that have a specific usage. You can't use them out of their context. Yeah, you can't use them out of context. So for example, things like he says, like in the Quran, Allah says this: "Makanakum antum wa shurakaukum." Makanakum. So the word makanakum is always used in a threat. You only use it when you're threatening someone, like when the police or the authority is speaking to a criminal. Say makanakum, makanakum. So makanakum means stay in your place, stop right there. Yeah, do not move an inch. Yeah, so this kind of statement is only used in the negative. Or for example, جعلناهم أحاديث, we made them into ahadith, we made them into an example. This is only used in a negative way. Yeah, so these kind of are very important, I think, to study, these kind of books. And I would only advise these kind of books to be studied by someone who is, like, if there was 10 steps of Arabic, like first step being someone who is very basic and like starter beginner, and the 10th step is like, you know, the most advanced people out there. I would say this book is for someone who has probably reached up to level 6, step 6, 5 or 6, maybe 7. Yeah, this is very useful. And this is like a book you're always going to benefit from. It's always got these nice little gems in there of Arabic language, and it kind of gives you an insight into culture as well, Arabic culture. So this is called Muzhir. It's in 2 volumes, Imam Suyuti, and he quotes in there, you know, statements from lots of people. That was one of the things. There was another thing as well, but I can't seem to find where it was. Yeah, okay, yeah. So it's like he mentions in here. He mentioned in here basically this interesting sort of like genre of writing that they used to have. It was called mushajjar. Yeah, mushajjar. So mushajjar basically is like, you know, have you ever played that game where you say something, and the last word you've said, the next person has to start the sentence with that word. Yeah, and then the last word that they said, the next person has to start. It's like a story. You kind of go around. So this was actually a genre of Arabic, you know, literature, and it's called mushajjar, al-mushajjara. So it's like mushajjar means like shajara, it branches out. So wherever the branch ends, you continue it from there. So it was interesting how Arabs, you know, had various types of language. So anyway, I'm thinking maybe in the future I'm just going to go through this book. In the future, maybe condense certain sections of it and make a series on the Arabic language. Okay, shadhar madhar, that's it. Tafarraqu shadhar madhar. Yeah, that's the one. In the Quran, I don't think it comes anywhere, you know. I don't think so. Or does it? I can't think of anything. Okay, your question. So your question is, how do you get rid of jealousy? The most important thing I would say to get rid of jealousy is 2 things. The person you're jealous of is make lots and lots of dua for them. And number 2 is buy them gifts. If you're jealous of someone, buy them a gift. Trust me, jealousy disappears very fast. Yeah, so buy them a gift and make lots of dua for them. Good things. Okay, finally, last one. Mufti, could you recommend books a person can study from step 1 to 10 to improve their Arabic? Yes. My YouTube channel, I basically have starting to make a series. So I have like this syllabus where first of all you study 17 lessons of Quranic Arabic, and then that gives you a deep understanding of how Arabic works, and then you move on to application of that in Surah Yasin, and I'm working on another one, Surah Mulk, and then you go into Ajurumiyah, and then from there you go into Sharq Qatr al-Nada, and then from there I'm still you know, still under construction, but that's basically what I say. Adhkar al-Humaqa wal-Mughafirun. MashaAllah. Inshallah. I'm the Imam of them. Okay. Anyway, Jazakallah khair, guys. Thank you very much. Hope you guys have a wonderful time, and I'll try to do one maybe end of next week sometime. Otherwise, if I don't, inshallah, I'm going to be traveling to Aqsa, inshallah, in about a week's time. So I might make some from there, inshallah, hopefully. Make dua. You know, I get there safely. Jazakumullah khair, guys. Thank you very much. Remember me in your du'as, and I will see you, inshallah. Okay. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.